News arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, almost hesitant phone call from my son, Mark. At 29, he was a man grown, yet still in many ways my boy. For years, his life had been a comfortable, predictable rhythm. Work, gym, evenings spent with me in our cozy apartment, the occasional casual date that never seemed to blossom into anything serious. I'd learned not to push, not to pry, but a part of me, the maternal part that yearned for continuity and grandchildren, had begun to quietly despair. Was he destined to remain a bachelor, forever tied to his mother's apron strings, albeit metaphorically? The thought, while selfish, was a persistent whisper in the quiet hours of the night. "Mom," he began, his voice a little strained, a little too casual, "I have something to tell you." My heart had done its usual protective flutter. Was he in trouble? Had he lost his job? My mind, ever the catastrophist, raced through a litany of potential disasters. I'm getting married." The words hung in the air, then settled, warm and unexpected, like a ray of sunshine breaking through a long overcast sky. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me, so potent it brought tears to my eyes. "Married? Oh, Mark, my darling boy, that's wonderful. Who is she? Why haven't you told me?" The questions tumbled out, a joyous cascade. All those years of quiet yearning, of watching friends dote on their grandchildren, of wondering if I'd ever experienced that particular joy, seemed to evaporate in an instant. He chuckled, a sound of relief. "Her name's Sasha. We've been together for a while now. We rented an apartment together about a year ago." "An apartment? A year?" A tiny prickle of surprise, quickly overshadowed by happiness, made itself known. My son, my seemingly transparent Mark, had kept such a significant part of his life from me. But then, he was a grown man. He had every right to his privacy. And besides, this was good news, truly good news. An apartment? Oh, Mark, that's lovely. I'm so happy for you. When do I get to meet this wonderful Sasha? He promised to arrange a meeting soon, and for the next few days, I walked on air. My son married. Grandchildren. The future, which had seemed a little dim and solitary, suddenly sparkled with possibility. I imagined family dinners, holidays filled with laughter, tiny hands reaching for mine. It was everything I had secretly hoped for. The invitation came a few weeks later. They had filed their application, and Sasha and Mark wanted me to come to their apartment for dinner. A small part of me, the traditionalist, felt a pang of something akin to disappointment. Usually, the son brought his fiancée to his mother's home for the first formal introduction, but I quickly dismissed it. Times had changed. What mattered was that they were happy, and I was finally going to meet the woman who had captured my son's heart. I arrived at their building with a small cake, a gesture of celebration. The apartment, located in a modern, somewhat impersonal complex, was tidy enough. But as I stepped inside, a subtle disquiet settled over me. It wasn't messy, no, but it lacked the warmth, the lived-in quality that transforms a rented space into a home. They had been here a year, Mark had said. A year was ample time to infuse a place with personality, with comfort. Yet, it felt temporary. A collection of functional furniture, impersonal decor. It was a small observation, perhaps a quibble, but it lingered. Sasha herself was polite, almost deferential. She was a pretty girl, with bright eyes and a ready smile. She had prepared a good dinner, a simple but well-cooked meal. We sat, made polite conversation, and shared a bottle of wine. Just one bottle, split between the three of us. It was all very civil, very proper. We talked about their plans, the upcoming wedding. They suggested that her parents would come to visit in a couple of weeks, and we could all meet and discuss the wedding details then. It seemed like a perfectly normal, pleasant evening. I left feeling reassured, my earlier apprehension about the apartment fading in the glow of their apparent happiness. But fate, as it often does, had a way of interjecting its own narrative. 3 days later, a pipe burst in my bathroom. A minor disaster, but a disaster nonetheless. The emergency plumber patched it up, but warned me it was a temporary fix. A permanent solution was needed. Plumbing was not my forte, so I called Mark. He was my son, my rock. He promised to come over that evening, take a look, and pick up whatever parts were necessary. He arrived, as promised, but with a package in his hand. As he set it down, I heard the unmistakable clinking of bottles. My gaze must have lingered, for he shifted uncomfortably, a flush rising on his cheeks. Just some beers, Mom. Going to meet friends later. Sasha's waiting for me there. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Mark, I said, my voice softer than I intended, but firm. You need to be careful with alcohol. His family history, a dark thread woven through generations, was a constant shadow in my mind. His father, my late husband, had struggled with it. My own grandfather, a kind man, had been consumed by it. On my side of the family, alcohol was rarely touched. A glass of wine at Christmas, perhaps, but never more. But for Mark, the predisposition was there, a silent, insidious threat. I, who barely touched a drop, lived with a quiet fear for him. He waved off my concern, a dismissive gesture that stung. Mom, I'm fine. I control myself. What's a couple of beers going to do? He didn't understand. Or perhaps he chose not to. The conversation ended there, but a new, more urgent worry began to fester. I made a mental note, a silent promise to myself. I needed to talk to Sasha. She was going to be his wife. She needed to know. She needed to understand the shadow that lurked in his family line, the vulnerability he carried. Perhaps she wasn't aware. Perhaps with her help, we could safeguard him. A couple of days later, I called Sasha, inviting her over, specifically asking her to come alone. Her voice on the phone had held a note of surprise, but she agreed. She arrived, looking a little nervous, a little unsure. I offered her tea and we sat in my living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Sasha, I began, choosing my words carefully. There's something you probably don't know about Mark. He shouldn't drink. He has a predisposition to it. It runs in his family. If he starts, he could slide very quickly. You're going to be his wife, his partner. That's why I'm telling you this. She listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she replied, her voice calm, almost too calm. We don't really drink much, Mrs. Petrova. Just sometimes to relax. But I hear you. We talked for a little longer about innocuous things, the weather, wedding plans. Then she left. I watched her go, a flicker of hope igniting within me. She had said she heard me. I wanted to believe she understood. At that moment, she seemed like a serious, sensible young woman. I truly believed she would be a good influence, a protective force. I was wrong, so terribly, tragically wrong. The following weekend, a burst of domestic energy propelled me to the local market. I had a favorite butcher there, a woman whose family had been in the business for generations, and her cuts of meat were always the freshest, the most flavorful. I bought a roast for myself, and then, on impulse, a generous portion of stewing beef for Mark and Sasha. A little something to stock their freezer, a gesture of a future mother-in-law. I was already on my way home in a taxi, the bags heavy on my lap, when the thought struck me, why not drop it off now? It was morning. They would surely be home. A quick call to Mark confirmed it, though his voice was thick with sleep, a groggy mumble that barely registered my words. Still, he seemed to understand I was on my way. The intercom at their building buzzed for what felt like an eternity before a faint, crackling voice finally granted me access. The elevator ride up was filled with a pleasant sense of anticipation. I imagined them, sleepy-eyed and smiling, happy for the unexpected delivery. But when the apartment door finally creaked open, the reality that greeted me was a far cry from my cheerful imaginings. The air that hit me was a physical force, a wave of stale, sour alcohol fumes so potent it made my eyes water. It was the smell of a long night of heavy drinking, a smell I knew all too well from my past, a smell that instantly resurrected a host of unwelcome memories. They were both there, swaying slightly in the doorway, their faces pale and puffy, their eyes bloodshot and unfocused. They were, to put it bluntly, drunk. Not just hungover, but still actively, profoundly intoxicated. The sight of them, so disheveled and reeking of booze, sent a chill of pure dread down my spine. My carefully constructed hopes for my son's future, for his well-being, began to crumble. I pushed past them, my heart a leaden weight in my chest, and made my way to the kitchen. I placed the meat on the counter, the cheerful, domestic gesture now feeling like a bitter irony. Mark, mumbling something incoherent, stumbled towards the bathroom. I turned to Sasha, my voice sharp with a mixture of anger and fear. "We had a conversation, Sasha. What is this?" She bristled, her politeness from our previous meeting completely gone, replaced by a sullen, defensive anger. "What do you take us for, alcoholics?" "It was a friend's birthday last night. We had a few drinks. We came home late. We just haven't slept it off yet. It's not like we do this every day." Her words, meant to be reassuring, had the opposite effect. The defensiveness, the immediate leap to anger, the minimization of the situation, it was all too familiar. I had heard those same excuses, that same indignant tone, from my late husband countless times. I just shook my head, a profound sense of disappointment washing over me. This was not the relaxing she had spoken of. This was something else entirely. This was a problem. I left their apartment that day with a heavy heart. The image of my son, so drunk he could barely stand, was seared into my mind. I gave him a stern talking, to later a lecture filled with all the love and fear that was churning inside me. I told him to think with his head, to consider the consequences. I warned him that a woman who drank like that, who dismissed my concerns so readily, was not the kind of woman who would support him, who would help him build a stable family. He listened, or at least he seemed to, but I could see the pull of Sasha's influence, the desire to defend her, to protect their relationship from my interference. For a while, things seemed to quiet down. There were no more drunken mornings, no more slurred phone calls. I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Perhaps my words had hit home. Perhaps they were making an effort. But then came the meeting with Sasha's parents, and the fragile hope I had been nurturing was shattered into a million pieces. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon, a whirlwind of forced cheerfulness and cheap cologne. Sasha's mother, a woman with a brittle smile and eyes that darted around the room, was at least making an effort. Her husband, however, was another story entirely. From the moment he stepped through the door, his focus was singular, the bottle of vodka he had brought with him. It was, he declared with a booming laugh, that was a little too loud for the small apartment, a proper drink for a proper celebration. The man was a walking, talking stereotype of a seasoned alcoholic. His face was a roadmap of broken capillaries, his nose a telltale shade of purple. His hand, as he poured the first round of drinks, trembled slightly, and his eyes, beneath bushy, unkempt brows, had the dull, glazed look of a man who was already several drinks ahead of everyone else. He started pouring shots almost as soon as the introductions were over, his voice a gravelly rasp as he insisted that everyone partake. "To the happy couple," he roared, raising his glass. "To my beautiful daughter and her fine young man." I watched my son, my heart in my throat. To his credit, he refused. "I'm not much of a drinker, sir," he said, his voice polite but firm. "But I'll toast with a glass of water." The father-in-law-to-be's face darkened. Not a drinker? What kind of man isn't a drinker? Come on, son. Don't be shy. You're part of the family now. You have to drink with your new father-in-law. It's a sign of respect. He pushed a shot glass towards Mark, his voice taking on a wheedling, manipulative tone. You respect me, don't you, son? You respect my daughter. It was a classic textbook move of an alcoholic, a tactic I had seen my own father-in-law use countless times. The emotional blackmail, the appeal to tradition, the thinly veiled threat. I held my breath, praying Mark would stand his ground. He did, though I could see the effort it cost him. He was a good man, my Mark, a kind and respectful man, and this boorish, drunken lout was using that against him. Sasha, who had been sitting silently, a sour expression on her face, finally spoke up. Dad, leave him alone. If he doesn't want to drink, he doesn't have to. But her words lacked conviction. There was no real force behind them, no genuine attempt to protect her fiancé. It was a token protest, nothing more. And then, to my utter astonishment, she picked up her own shot glass and downed it in one gulp. But I'll have one, she said, a defiant look in her eyes. And so it began. The father-in-law-to-be, now with a willing drinking partner, proceeded to get systematically, belligerently drunk. He poured shot after shot for himself and Sasha, his voice growing louder, his stories more rambling and incoherent. Sasha's mother, after a few half-hearted attempts to slow him down, simply gave up and joined in, her brittle smile growing increasingly fixed and glassy. The air grew thick with the smell of vodka and sweat, the conversation degenerating into a series of drunken boasts and maudlin pronouncements. I sat there, a silent observer, a stone-cold sober witness to this train wreck of a family gathering. I didn't drink, of course. I was the designated survivor, the one who would have to remember this horror show in all its grim detail. I watched Sasha, my future daughter-in-law, match her father drink for drink, her pretty face growing flushed and slack, her laughter becoming loud and shrill. I watched my son, my dear sweet Mark, trapped in this nightmare, his face a mask of polite discomfort, his eyes filled with a dawning horror that mirrored my own. At one point, Sasha's mother, her words slurring, leaned towards me and patted my hand. Don't you worry about us, dearie, she slurred, her breath a foul wave of alcohol. We're simple folk, but we're good folk. We've got heart. I didn't answer. I just nodded, a polite, meaningless gesture. I wasn't worried about them. I was terrified for my son. This wasn't just a family that enjoyed a drink. This was a family steeped in alcohol, a family where drinking was not just a pastime, but a way of life. And they were about to drag my son, with his genetic predisposition, his inherited vulnerability, into their dysfunctional, alcohol-soaked world. I finally made my excuses and left. The image of that chaotic, drunken gathering burned into my memory. The fragile hope I had held for Mark's future, for his happiness with Sasha, was now completely extinguished. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this marriage would be a disaster, and there was nothing I could do to stop it.